Welcome to the Week in Sports Cars on the Marshall Pruett podcast, presented by Cooper Tires and also presented by... This is the part you're supposed to say Graham Goodwin. Graham Goodwin.
Oh, sorry, I thought we had a sponsor.
Well, you're also the presenter, you nut. I mean...
well, my apologies. Yes, hello.
You're killing me. We're already failing our listeners in the first 30 seconds. And if you're a first-time listener, also thanks. We appreciated you checking it out, and we apologize you're now a former listener. Oh, boy.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and we know you're all over the world because we see your wonderful questions. We'll be dealing with those just shortly. Raring to go. Kind of sitting between intercontinental travel and continental travel off at the end of this week to Portugal for the ELMS, Michelin Le Mans Cup end of season bonanza, where we've got titles up for grabs. So looking forward to that thoroughly.
So for those of you who, despite very poor decision-making, are first-time listeners and have opted to continue with the madness, that is Graham Goodwin, a dear friend, veteran sports car reporter, owner of the dailysportscar.com website. Graham is primarily a man of FIA WEC and European Le Mans Series coverage, but also Asian Le Mans Series and a variety of 24-hour type goodness, be it SRO or otherwise. And I'm Marshall Pruett, and been a somewhat long-time sports car reporter here in the United States, covering IMSA first and foremost, and having covered the American Le Mans Series, the old Canned Ham, the Grand Am Rolex Series, and what else? A little bit of Pirelli World Challenge. So this is kind of what we do. This is our weekly show where we talk about sports cars, the things that we love outside of our daily profession. There's also a passion of ours. And what was it, Graham? Maybe 2 months ago, whatever it was, where we changed to a format that rather than you and I just blathering on and then adding in listener questions towards the end, we figured, you know what, why not just drive the entire show with listener questions and sprinkle in the odd conversation we wanted to have. But for the most part, thanks to you all, both Reddit, Facebook, and Twitter users, for feeding us our weekly content.
Absolutely, it seems to work well. The reality is that, of course, our listeners, far and wide that they are, will be dealing with most of the main topics of the day. There will be the odd one or two things that will pop up. We'll deal with them here as and when they do. But for the most part, they've been great navigators, haven't they, to keep us on that kind of course of what actually are the issues du jour in endurance racing, both sides of the pond and beyond. And boy, have we got another bumper bundle, despite the fact that I was rather late to the punch in posting the request for questions. So thank you again, everybody, for that. There's some crackers in here.
We also have, so we not only have the issues du jour, we also have the issues of the day. So a double offering of goodness there. Sorry, a little bit of a Dumb and Dumber reference. Well, the last 2 weeks we have kicked off with FIA, WEC, and general ACO world. I say we break from tradition, my man, and go nuts and kick it off with IMSA. You know why I had that idea, Graham? Because of the list of questions you organized. You put those at the top this time.
I did. So, are you making America great again? You must be.
Well, I'm making America wide again. That I've been on that duty for a little bit. Let's start with our friend Adam Smith, who says, any news or rumors on what is going to become of the ESM team for 2019? Glad that this was that we have this one right up front, Graham, because it's an unfortunate thing. It's an unfortunately meaty. I wish this was a very thin topic, Adam, one that I could say, yep, all's good, no problem. Unfortunately, I have and we have genuine concerns as to whether IMSA will have ended its most recent championship a little over a week ago with 4 DPI manufacturers on the grid, and might return in 2019 with 3, all based on the increasingly real possibility that ESM might not be there at all. I think they will, Graham. I think we're going to end up with at least one car doing the endurance races. But there's, based on Comments made by team co-owner Scott Sharp, for example, at Petit Le Mans, saying that he's not sure what he's going to do next year from a driving standpoint. He's been the driver/owner along with Ed Brown. When you have Ed Brown, who has effectively stepped back from racing, Ed being the CEO of Patron, now the team's former sponsor, and his co-owner, the veteran race car driver, the champion, Scott Sharp, saying he is, not so sure on the driving part, whether it's going to be full-time anymore. Might just be the long rounds. We'll see. When you hear, Graham, that a proud and successful team like formerly Tequila Patron ESM, now just ESM, Extreme Speed Motorsports, with the fine Ligier-based Nissan on-road DPIs, lost its primary sponsor. One of its two owners has stepped back from racing those cars. The other one is saying he might be headed in that direction, a little bit slower than Ed, but might be headed in that same direction. We have Pippo Durrani being the first to bolt the camp and sign with the Action Express team. We have Johannes van Overbeek announcing his retirement from full-time pro racing. It really leaves Ryan Deal in a position where I know and you know he has been working his behind off, trying to see what opportunities he can create. Are there sponsors he can attract? Are there paying drivers he could bring in? I know that you, being one of the good citizens of the paddock, Graham, have tried to help, just as you've fielded some inquiries from folks looking for some potential help in North America. We obviously can't name who, but you've reached out to Ryan and said, hey, you might give these folks a call. There could be something that they could help with. You guys could help with at ESM. We've gone from what I thought was, okay, they lost Patron, that's bad, but, in the past, privately, the founder of IMSA and that big stock car organization, some of those dollars have kind of been slid quietly to help some teams in need, make sure they're on the grid. There was a hope that at minimum that would happen, Graham, just a backstop while they continue to look for funding. Could still happen, not saying it can't, but I haven't heard about that assuredness. Haven't heard about that. All right, if you guys come up short, we're still going to make sure you're there, buy you more time to try and make something happen. Haven't heard that yet. So that's what's leading me to a genuine place of concern that are we still going to have that fourth DPI constructor on the grid next year? Obviously hope that they will. But I'll throw in one other quick thing, Graham, before you take this topic, and that is, as someone who spent 20-plus years of my life working for racing teams, you get to the off-season, you learn before the off-season that the primary sponsor that makes all of this possible is going away. Then you get to the off-season and you have, of your 4 full-time drivers, one announces he's leaving before the season's over. The other one announces he's about to retire. The third one says he might wind down his driving career. That doesn't paint a super positive picture. If you're a mechanic, you're a truck driver, you're a whatever, knowing that with a very short off-season, Graham, knowing that we're going to be having Michelin tire tests at Daytona here in less than 2 months at Daytona. This is the time when crew members who start seeing and feeling things might be a bit shaky say, I'm going to go over to Team X because my pal there told me they've got a job available, and as much as I love being with whomever I'm with right now, I can't afford to get to December when all the good jobs are taken and find out, hey, by the way, you're really not going to be able to pay your mortgage next month, or the bill for your kid's school, wherever they're going. That's going to be uncertain. This is the point in time, unfortunately, where beyond just are they going to be on track and have fun racing, the real infrastructure, that's where things start to really get destabilized unless money comes in and answers are provided. And once the infrastructure goes away, mate, I don't care if a big sponsor signs a month or 2 months from now. If there aren't really good people left, you have a shadow of the organization that returns. I find it difficult to disagree with you. I really hope they can do something here. Let's not forget, these are the reigning Sebring champions from this year.
Of course, those back-to-back wins in the pre-DPI era at Sebring and Daytona for the team. This is a team of high quality. It's a team that knows how to get those results.
And
but
character,
the clock,
high character as well.
Absolutely. But the clock is ticking very loudly indeed. And they'll be very well aware of that. And it is that wake-up call. And actually, this, through answering the questions we get from listeners, it is the opportunity to just put in a couple of bits of the real world of racing and the business of racing that perhaps otherwise wouldn't be that obvious. The reality is with these things, it's an 18-month to 2-year cycle to find these kind of packages to come together. And whatever you think about whichever class of racing we're talking about, the reality is these are big buck operations. This is not the kind of stuff you can find by having a rummage down the back of the couch. These are multi-million-dollar programs, and they do not come easily. So it's very hard work for a lot of people in the background here. And, I've zero doubts there are prospects. The key to it is, can you get it across the line in time for the start of the season? As you perfectly express, Marshall, it's not just the season, it's the pre-season testing as well. Because, this is, DPI, like any prototype series, is a rolling stone, and the guys are going to be out there, they're going to be testing, there's going to be tyre testing, there's going to be development. If you fall behind on that curve, you are going to feel it for a very long time indeed. So I'm sure there are lots of furrowed brows. We wish them well. I know some of them are listening to the podcast. We really wish you well. You've been a fantastic part of the IMSA show, the rejuvenation of IMSA, and we want to see you back. Let's just wait and see what happens come January.
And I'll just add to close that, just as you and I are trying, as we hear of opportunities, drivers, I've pointed one driver in particular to Scott Sharp saying, hey, this person has a budget and has expressed a willingness to do something in prototype. The two of you should talk. You've done the same, pointing folks there. Dear listeners, if you know of folks or businesses that might be interested, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to forward those things on. To me, maybe this is a bizarre mindset, but I think of some documentary crews that are out in the wilderness or wherever, and they see an animal that is struggling, and they don't intervene because they believe they need to be fully impartial and let nature take its course. I maybe don't take that view, even though Graham and I are reporters and we're supposed to be completely impartial. True, we are impartial, but we are also ones that believe in health, and if we have the ability, through folks we know or folks that you all know, to point them in directions that can bring health and bring stability where it might be lacking, please let us know. We'll do it. And granted, we're not talking about, oh, you should reach out to Coca-Cola. Yeah, of course, they should reach out to Coca-Cola and Bill Gates and Jeffrey Bezos and, but they know that part. But if you actually know some drivers, know contacts at companies that might be interested, something where there's an actionable item, not just go talk to people with billions and tell them to give it to you. Don't hesitate to let us know on Facebook, DM, whatever it is, and we will gladly pass those things on. You want to grab the next IMSA item?
Well, let's go with Ben Tyler. We've had a bit of prototype. Let's have a bit of GT. Will the GTLM cars see a decrease in lap times next year with all the cars on Michelin instead of their Michelin rubber on a Conti rubbered track? Well, it's a slightly in-depth question. What do you reckon, MP?
It's great. So thank you. We love questions like this, Ben. I believe we will see an increase in lap time, not so much because there's definitely a little bit of something here to there being a high level of Michelin rubber on the track. Keep in mind that at most events, we will not have 100% exclusivity with Michelin. There could be other series, feeder series, some that aren't even necessarily in the IMSA family that are on track that are not on Michelin. So if we're talking a Michelin race, then obviously they will have plenty of track time to put down pure Michelin rubber. But I think we're just going to see a general increase in lap times altogether through development, and also the fact that the GTD cars plus prototypes will be on Michelin, and they tend to make tires that are quick and durable. So, general overall increase, yes. Add in the fact that you mentioned here, Ben, and I think yes as well. So I love astute questions like this. Justin Ford, you are up next. Justin asks, did the Lexus GTD cars get better this season due to the outgoing 3GT's ongoing development, or was it BOP help? How can we ever determine where the improvements stem from? ? Well, we mentioned at the end of last week's show, Graham, that, boy, BOP doesn't come up that often. We actually got a couple here where folks are like, sorry, I got BOP questions. Another great, this is one of my ongoing bugaboos, Justin, and it's your last note here. How can we ever determine where the improvements stem from? For those of us who are accustomed to speaking with drivers and engineers or being trackside, you can see, you can hear some of the things that might be different as improvements are made to the cars. Electronically, it could be traction control, it could be a variety of things. But back to your point, it is incredibly hard to tell where the improvements come from unless we're talking about a car that's been off the pace. And a car that's been off the pace and in a very short amount of time, Graham, finds that pace. We can often point to BOP. Since IMSA does publish their BOP, we can look to that and also know what to expect. Maybe it's a little bit of added top-end boost, for example, in a turbocharged car. Well, would be a surprise then if that car is not only seeing a higher top speed, but more aggressive and better to defend or pass braking zone, going in, into a corner where there's some form of high speed achieved entering it. With the Lexus, I'd say that I think generally the perception was they had a more favorable BOP in 2018. I realize that there's no such thing as a BOP. It's a constantly developing thing, but I think the belief was they were in a better spot with BOP than they were in 2017. I would also say that just general performance-wise, the 3GT team did a much better job of weeding out the little mistakes that took them out of contention in 2017. And I've said it a few times, but it was often something dumb in pit lane, a driver hitting someone when there was no reason to, and all chances were lost. A lot of things were cleaned up this year. I do find it a bit funny, Graham, that in 2017, when it was a full factory, full pro effort, albeit new, there were a lot of silly mistakes made. Switched over to a Pro-Am team, and all of a sudden they really came on song and were incredibly competitive. Jack Hawksworth was a terror in qualifying. Dominic Baumann and Kyle Mercelli did an excellent job of winning a couple of races. So I think 3GT got a better handle on the cars for sure. I also would say let's not underplay the assistance and development of TRD, Toyota Racing Development, in the background on the technical development side to help hand 3GT better suggestions on, you name it, from a performance standpoint. So take all those things together, and I think that's why the cars were, for the most part, competitive at just about everywhere they went. But back to the closing thing, I'm with you, Justin. Sometimes it's really hard. You go, hey, that car popped up out of nowhere. Why is it going so well? We go back and look at the BOP table, see if there was something there, and if not, then we say, well, must be the team having unearthed something that they'd been missing or just didn't know existed.
It's worth saying, actually, about that car in particular. It had a triple Genesis, the RCF GT3. I think this was either the third or the fourth iteration of car before they homologated the final GT3 version for the Lexus by Lexus. So a troubled Genesis for the car. Had success early in Europe, won on the Nürburgring, the VLN, has done pretty well in Blancpain as well. So the teams that have been working with Lexus on the development of that car have been finding, unlocking the code, if you like. And I've no doubt that's reached, across the water to the IMSA development side anyway. One other thing to think about, you make a good point about that transition from a full pro team to a Pro-Am team. There is an element there where put it this way: if you're pro, there was huge pressure there. Who's the daddy, if you like? With a Pro-Am team, you're likely sitting in the awning or in the truck with the guy who is bringing your wages to it. You better not be making mistakes that is ruining his weekend. So that does have an element there of just the accountability of the driver in some of those ultimate extreme situations. It has, though, been a pleasure to see these guys bring it on song. Let's wait and see what 3GT are going to bring back. And let's give a quick plug as well, by the way, MP, for another of the Marshall Pruett podcasts that you've just delivered to the site, which is a look inside the successor team for Lexus in IMSA.
Yeah, that was with our pal James Sully Sullivan, and we were hoping to also have his co-team owner Jimmy Vassar on. We were actually trying to record this late last week, and a little bit of scheduling issues, but Jimmy was unavailable because he is busy in the middle of a grape harvest in Napa with his V12 vineyard. So had Sully on. Interesting. Found out that, and you might take a listen to it, but found out one of the questions we'd had was, are they buying or receiving brand new Lexus RCFs? What's happening there? And no, indeed, the pair of 3GT cars were passed on and sent their way. So I know that someone had a question. I don't know if it was for a Weekend Sports Cars or just a general one that might have come in on Facebook or Twitter, but someone had asked about the cars. Who owns what? Does Lexus own those? Did the team buy those? I think we can deduce that those were indeed Lexus properties, and those Lexus items were passed on to the new service providers. So you might take a listen to that. Sully's a pretty good guy. Nobody knows him in IMSA, nor would there be a reason for folks to know him. I've known him for 7-8 years, maybe a little bit longer, since he came into IndyCar, and I love his energy and what he's going to bring. I think he is someone that IMSA, Scott Atherton, maybe, or Ed Bennett, they are going to grow really sick and tired of him quickly, because he is, he's a grown man in his 30s with a family and all kind, normal human being with normal responsibilities, but he has the energy of a 6-month-old puppy. So first of all, we don't have that many IMSA team owners with just that level of vitality running through their veins, but he is a constant and big idea guy. Loves to disrupt and disturb, not for the sake of, but with his team, with sponsors, with liveries. That's something else we speak about. And so I look forward, even though this is at the GTD level, in theory the third and lowest of the 3 IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship rungs, but I think he's going to bring some great energy. I think he's going to push IMSA as well to say, hey, why aren't you doing this? What the heck? We could have more viewers. We could have more fans at the track. I don't know if he knows it yet, but I think he is going to end up being a very positive influence on the series in ways that go beyond how his cars are faring on the racetrack, all in partnership with Canada's excellent AIM Autosport. Let's see. Let me grab this one real quick. I'll grab the one from Steve Lawrence, and then why don't you grab Jonathan Schultz's after that, yeah. Graham. Steve says, with the Mazda Road to Indy being done, is there any chance that Mazda Team Yost could use those funds to run another car? In theory, yes, they could, Steve. I don't believe that was ever the plan or the intent. From what we deduce, we had corporate Mazda North American operations make 2 cost-cutting decisions that seemed to be unrelated, but I think they are actually completely related. First of all, there was an announcement early in the year that they were ending their sponsorship of Laguna Seca, Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca. It was coming to an end after 17 years. And although it wasn't huge, I forget what it was, but it was a decent amount of money that they were spending each year for the naming rights. So they announced that was coming to an end. No real context, just, hey, we've done it, we got what we wanted out of it, and that was that. We then heard in August or so, late July, August, that they were ending their sponsorship of the Mazda Road to Indy Open Wheel Series, and there weren't a ton, similar verbiage. offered on why. We've done this, got a lot out of it, New Horizons, new this, that, and the other. I think these two things, Steve, had nothing to do with motor racing or the racing side. I think this was more on the corporate side saying, if it's not actual cars on track that are ours, that are also sports car shapey, something that we can kind of hint is aligned with what we sell at dealerships, then let's not do it. That we don't need to sponsor this and that and things that aren't hardcore on-track racing in the sports car context that we're familiar or most comfortable with. So cut the money going to a track, cut the money going to a junior open wheel series. I think those were just done, Steve, from a general budget cost savings standpoint on the corporate level, not, hey, we want more money for the racing side, where do we get it? What can we axe elsewhere to help our big IMSA program? So I could be wrong, but that's what I think we have there. Why don't you grab Jonathan Schultz's next, mate?
I will. Jonathan asks, why didn't IMSA replace LMPC, the old Formula Le Mans FLM 09 Chevy engine open top prototypes, with LMP3 or something else after the last season the cars ran? I think there's a simple answer, and then a lot more complex answer to this one, Jonathan. The simple answer is because they didn't need to, because the vast majority of their all-time LMPC grid transitioned to LMP2 and to prototypes. So they retained, for the most part, the car count that they actually otherwise would have lost. In doing so, it also gave them the opportunity to add LMP3 as the feeder series, the IMSA Prototype Challenge series, which, by the way, a number of the teams involved in Prototype are also involved in. It gives them the opportunity to introduce new customers to the wacky world of prototype racing, which, in time, will very much help to kind of feed new talent and, for that matter, new budgetary opportunities through to the full IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. So, effectively, it's probably one of the very few occasions on which, if you like, the ACO model, the pyramid ladder model, with similar machinery, has been transposed almost seamlessly to the IMSA competition. So at the moment, LMP3 filling a really valuable commercial side of things for a number of teams, but also giving the opportunity to actually build for future planning, something which has not always been there in the past to the extent it is now. And I think that, it'd be interested in your perspective on this one, MP. I think that is beginning to bear a little bit of fruit moving forward.
Yeah, there was a concern, a definite concern, which we spoke of, I think just strictly in print because we hadn't started this podcast yet, but there's something we definitely wrote about at the time of, okay, so you want to get rid of the Pro-Am prototypes, okay, you want to try and simplify, okay, we'll get down from 4 classes to 3 classes, okay. But are we going to negatively impact, are we going to hurt that pipeline for PC teams, just called Pro-Am teams, stepping up to big-time prototype, the full pro level? And we found out that no, actually we were wrong. The concerns that we held were unfounded. We've had effectively, or just about every single PC team that was competing at the end of 2017 step up. The only one that's really fallen off was Bar 1. They moved up for the opening round, used a Riley Multimatic Mark 30 chassis at Daytona, which was unfortunately not too dissimilar to using their old PC car. They might have actually had better results with their old PC car instead of using that if they were allowed. That car just not meant for low drag, high speed circuit like that. They suffered throughout, and the program went nowhere afterwards. But if you look at the Performance Tech team, the PR1 Matheson team, which has since morphed into AFS PR1, I mean, they obviously had already moved up in 17 as well, but I'm just thinking of kind of recent big-name PC teams. Core Autosport obviously made the leap as well, and I feel like I'm forgetting at least one other team. But we had, by and large, all those PC teams decide, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to go up. And so, yeah, I think that has been borne out as something that was a good call by IMSA. And I would also say that now with the decision to split next year, so we will have dedicated full Pro DPI and the Pro-Am P2 Graham, I think we actually are restoring the one aspect that was a little dodgy this year, and that being a true LMP2 Pro-Am model, or I should say a Pro-Am prototype model that was lost when PC went away. Took us a year, but we're getting it back next season. And you throw in the fun little twist of, and a Pro-Am P2 team almost won the dang championship this year, almost knocked off every single factory. So, yeah, again, one of the things I love, I hate being wrong, but I love it when I'm wrong, and it's because something positive happened that I didn't expect. So, in this case, I think we're in a good place, man. I don't think we need LMP3. I don't think we need to add a fourth class in. I think with what they've established by splitting the prototype classes, we effectively get PC 2017, but with proper LMP2 grade top shelf prototypes. So
this is the irony, isn't it? I mean, we've got effectively, in terms of, if you look at LMP1, DPI, or LMP2 as the kind of top level of global prototypes at the moment, there are effectively 4 series that run those cars, with the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, the WEC, the European Le Mans Series, and the Asia Le Mans Series, and not one of them, not one, has actually got the same class structure. In some way, shape or form, there is a difference between the cars that run in all of those 4 series, which for me, you know, okay, if you were going to be very vanilla about it, you know, we'd all say it would make sense to have, you know, a level playing field and the same rules and blah, 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 blah. But actually, it does make it fun. It does mean that you see and hear things that are a little bit different. So let's wait and see. That knits beautifully. I'm going to challenge you back with this one, MP, with Stephen Olive's question, who says, any idea what the car count for LMP2 and IMSA next year is looking like? We had some intel on that one, but no results yet to the intel that you and I think, have both heard.
Yeah, and you've actually been the leader on that one, having heard from many European teams that have expressed interest, be it in the 4 NAEC rounds, the endurance events, or even full season. I don't, Stephen, have a feel for what that exact number is going to be. I do know that mid-summer, when IMSA announced the splitting of the classes, there was a concern that, well, not only the splitting, but we also had heard in a somewhat similar time frame that JDC is converting from spec LMP2s to Cadillac DPIs. Ricardo Juncos is coming in with a Cadillac. It sounded like there was a lot of movement coming in the DPI range, possibly at the expense of LMP2s. And I would say, and I've heard a few other things, can't talk about it yet, unfortunately, but I've heard that there's still a possibility that some of the current LMP2 teams might be trying to see what DPIs they could grab. We know that the Nissans in particular, is something that Ligier would love to sell, but I think we're going to be better than anticipated, Stephen. Please mark this date down as the date that Pruett said something completely stupid and was wrong about. You can do that most days, by the way. But at least now, I have a feeling like instead of it being 2 rumblings of what I've heard, could be 4, could be 5, maybe, if things are really positive there, really, really positive. So if that's the case, I think we're in a good place. What I'd hate to see, and what IMSA would then have to consider, is skipping Daytona, which is going to have is always going to have a decent international car count, even Sebring to a slight degree, knowing that next year as well it's going to be a combined IMSA and WEC weekend, where in theory we could have WEC teams wanting to stay over after their race on Friday and play again Saturday during IMSA's 12 hours. But when we get to a Long Beach or a standalone non-major endurance event, if we find that we're staring at, Graham, 2 P2 cars, maybe 3, and that ends up settling out to be about the norm, I think that's where IMSA is going to have to ask some hard questions as well. The SCCA Pro Racing organization, for example, launched the new, whatever they call it, Formula 3 Americas or something like that, USF3, and its initial race had something like 4 cars. I think it might have gotten up to 6 at the most recent, but it looks like an idea that, knowing that, they had hoped it would take off, it looks like, unless there's really big surprise coming for next year, Graham, it looks like that thing's going to die on the vine just right out of the gate.
Is that the one with the Crawford?
No. Well, that's the USF4. That actually has really strong numbers. They said, okay, well then we're going to add the next step up, Formula 3, and it hasn't been, it has not been received. I just mentioned that because that's the thing we hope isn't what we are facing next year once we start to get into the normal rounds, go to Mid-Ohio, and here's 10, 12, whatever it is, DPIs, and 2 or 3 P2s. If that's the case, if you can barely fill a podium in any class in a big pro racing series like this, IMSA is probably going to have to ask themselves whether it's going to be a one-and-done experiment and to go back to a single unified class and re-embrace all the headaches of trying to balance LMP2s and DPIs in the same class. So I know that's off a little bit on, I don't want to say tangent, but off a little bit to the side here to your question, Stephen, but initial things that I've seen and heard say that we could be in the 3-4 range, maybe 5. I'm hoping it's more 4 to 5, and if so, I'm good with that. I think that's a decent enough car count where, we can have real questions as to who's going to be on the podium and what happens there. Anything in that 2 to 3 range, even 4, 3 is dodgy. Anything more than 3, and at least we can say, okay, there's a reason for it to exist. So I don't have anything more definitive than that to offer right now. I do believe, based on some of the things Graham and I have heard, that it shouldn't be too long, maybe another month or so, before we might be able to give you a better idea as to whether we have any ideas to what we're talking about. Let's see. Adam Bowman asks, will there be any TV coverage of the November Sebring race, and how come the DPI and P2 cars aren't going to be there? I would think those guys would be chomping at the bit to get some tire data before next year. I don't know, Adam, so this is something I need to ask about unless you know the answer to this on the TV side, nope. Graham. I'm guessing there's going to be something. I can't tell you if it's live streaming or post-race cut-down edit of some sort. I'm fairly positive there will be some sort of visually recorded something of the event to prove that it happened. As for why we won't have DPI and P2 cars, I would say this is more of a invitational taste test meant to attract new folks that are interested in coming in more on the Pro-Am level than the full big, fastest, crazy cars. So I never really, at least for me, felt that the lack of the IMSA's prototype class was a negative thing. I thought this was more of a come and kick the tires, see if you like the organization, with a variety of Pro-Am type cars. And I would say that this is also a pretty strong recognition, Adam, that our friends at the soon-to-be X, or is it already X, Pirelli World Challenge Series, they're not in a place of strength, as I see it. I know we've seen a couple of entrants already cast their lot coming over to IMSA, wanting to be a part of what IMSA's doing, I think based on some of the ownership and just general philosophy changes there. So you take that, you take some folks that might have GT4 level cars, GT3 level cars, whatever, LMP3 cars, and, hey, come on over, get a feel for us, what we're doing, one of our classic tracks, and not just from an officiating standpoint and, how we treat you, customer service, but also, as you mentioned, getting some of that additional early Michelin tire data would definitely be a good thing for those who are invited. We did write not too long ago that Michelin has added a test at Daytona in December, strictly just for teams to get a feel for the Michelins then before we get to the Roar before the 24. So I would say, for those DPI and P2 cars, they'll definitely, for those that haven't already been part of testing with Michelin, they will actually have a chance to go and do that at Daytona. So there's nothing really being lost by the prototypes not being at Sebring in this fun little Michelin thing that is going on there, which, I don't know how I feel about that, Graham. Well, I'm glad that it's happening for those who want it to happen. I'm also somewhat protective of time off between seasons, and, if we're going to have the IMSA season finale roughly the middle of October, we then go back to Sebring, similar-ish time frame. There's a Michelin test in the middle of December, and I don't think that's so much of a reporters come on out and cover as well, but we've got teams heading there. Then everyone, loads in the first weekend of January. All of a sudden, if we're just talking about having an actual month off, teams are on track effectively every month of the year. So that's the only thing which I'm like, all right, guys, come on, give folks a break.
I think it's a great opportunity for them to test out the logistics as well. Big step up for Michelin, a very different look to the paddock, I'm sure, when we all get to the Rolex 24 at Daytona. One that's not quite about the racing world, but an interesting one nonetheless. Joe Izzo asks both of us in our travels to Watkins Glen, did either of us ever make it to the International Motor Racing Research Centre? Wondering what you thought if you did. Says keep up the awesome work. Thanks very much, Joe. I meant to, but didn't. There was just too much to do and see for me to actually fit that into the one time I've actually made it out there, which was, of course, summer this year. I don't know if you've ever made your way to that fine institution, MP.
No, I have not, and I suck. This is just a reminder of how lame I am. No, I have not, Joe, and I should have. I've been invited there for a couple of things, dinners and celebrations of people. I did get to meet, I've forgotten his name, so further proof of how much I suck. I did meet one of the curators, though, who came out to the track and had a really nice conversation with him, but it is something that I must do. It is something that I must make happen, so got to get that done, and so I'm a bad person. Why don't I grab this one here from Ed Joris, and this piggybacks on something we spoke on last week a little bit. And we're back to BOP, so this is 2 of our 3. We limit ourselves to 3 BOP instances per episode, so we're up to 2 already. We're not even done with IMSA. Ed says, apologize, this is a straight-up balance of performance question, but I think it's a little different. He said, has GM outsmarted Honda Performance Development in this area for DPI? Let's say Wayne Taylor Racing and Action Express Racing sweep the podium at both Daytona and Sebring. Further, let's say Juncos is the slowest DPI. All through, clearly the caddies would need to be pegged back. But can IMSA do that and risk making the Juncos car uncompetitive? Doesn't the existence of a slow car limit what IMSA could do to the, quote, dominant package? And he then says, if Penske actually, let me just answer that. The answer is no, to be honest, Ed. If you have a single manufacturer that is demonstrating its ability to lead and, if not win, and you are in a BOP-regulated series, one would say that provided their ability to succeed was not just because every other car in the field was horrible, but because there was a demonstrated advantage of some capacity, regardless of whether there's a member of that model family that is off the pace. Ultimately, they're trying to balance the best of one model versus in theory, the best achieved by the other models. So in this capacity, I would fully expect IMSA to pull back on the Cadillacs, knowing that it would clamp down a bit on WTR and AXR, but also slow Juncos even more as the example. There's another mindset, Graham, that we know about BOP, and it's not one that you can use math to legislate, and that is if you have, say, a brand new manufacturer involved in the series, And even if they're with a factory, well-established team, IMSA and or any other championship with quality staff is going to look at the data that they are taking off of the car. They're going to look at the data that they are getting via their sector information throughout the track, their trap speed information, etc. They're going to look at all of that and determine where is the deficiency. Is this a car that we can see is accelerating hard off of the corners, right? Commensurate, simple, something that is right there with the others. Yet it has some sort of deficiency in top speed. Do we see there's a discrepancy in the numbers? Let's say coming off of corner A, this new model is at or around the same number as the other ones. Let's just say 50 miles an hour is what they're hitting at a measurable mark right off of a corner. They get to the end of that straight and they see that model is, pick a number, 5 miles an hour down to the others. Great. Well, that's where you're also wanting and needing to look at the car data as well and see, is this something that's being manipulated? Has the driver turned to a different map that tries to defeat really intelligent parsing of that information? Are we seeing a slight lift on the throttle? Are we seeing the brakes being breathed slightly to pull that number down? Is there artificial manipulation here? Sometimes, I'd probably say oftentimes, at the manufacturer level, there's still the ability to bypass any serious ability to really parse why there is a lack of speed in some place that could then be used as, hey, look, we're down, we need a BOP favor here. You also then have to look at some other things, Graham, and say, well, hey, if this car is, say, a rocket off of the corner and is up a mile an hour or two, yet is a bit slower at the end of the straight, well, okay, we can see that it could use a bit more top end, but A, how much did that acceleration or torque or whatever advantage off of the corner help them? If we're looking at elapsed times, is this something where they had a gain over the rest of the field in this section, and then did that help them get up to their VMAX before the others and then hold it, even though it was a little bit lower VMAX than the other cars? Were they able to sustain that for a longer period? And what's the overall lapse time from, say, the first timing marker we're talking about to the last one? And are they up or down on the stopwatch based on this? So it's not simply a case of, hey, they're down 5 miles an hour in the straight. We need to either make an aero change or a power change to make everything equal and matchy-matchy. Oftentimes we have cars that are a little bit different, and they express their speed in different ways, and therefore you can't really balance every model in every facet of every lap. So that's a bit of a generalism there, but it does come back to the point of they're going to look and see, hey, why is this car faster or slower? But they would also be able to say, if this is a new model, is this the team? We're going to talk to the drivers. We're going to try and, get a feel from folks. They're going to probably listen to radio communications. Man, you sure you put the rear tires on the rear instead of on the front? I'm like, what the hell's going on? Did you guys plug in all of the coil packs? You definitely get a feel, and there's that thing that isn't numerically driven necessarily, where a sanctioning body says, yeah, we're going to hold off on making any changes because whether they say it to the team's face or not, we're not 100% sure that you are getting the most out of the car. So before we start giving you things to make the car better, we want to be confident you as a team, in this case we're using Hunkosa as the example offered by Ed. Hey, Ricardo, you're brand new to IMSA. Brand new to big prototypes. We know you're a good team, but we aren't expecting you to be knocking off an Action Express or Wayne Taylor right out of the gate. Once you get your learning curve in a place that's good, then you'll be able to compete. But if we need to knock down some of these, some of the other model, or knock down this model in general because it's dominating with other teams, sorry, man. I know we're actually slowing you down a bit, too, while you're already slow, but you got a separate curve that's outside of BOP that must be addressed. So that's that quickly, and then, Ed, I'll get to this. The second portion of the BOP was, if Penske dominates, you can just cut them back. And what then is Acura's investment in Penske's drivers, shocks, and the overall talent worth? If Juncos is campaigning a, quote, stock ARX-05, then all the special Penske stuff can't be BOP'd because IMSA couldn't make Juncos uncompetitive. If there were a Juncos Acura, then Penske could actually develop their shocks, etc., without risk of looking like they are too fast. Now Penske's hands are tied. Seems that they are trapped in a world of fast, but not too fast. Yeah, a little bit. Again, I know you're using the Penske and Acura thing as a bit of a contextual effort with the Cadillac note up front, Ed. I would just say that there's different things going on here. We spoke about this last week, and I'll wrap on this before we move to Alex Eichmiller's question. Graham, if you could take that one next. I think the Penske team came away this year realizing that in their first true season of working in hardcore balance of performance, Penske Perfect was never going to be enough. Their way of doing what they do was never going to be enough to overcome the hardcore, mechanically based changes that BOP visits upon any and all models. And if IMSA said, hey, we are taking away X amount of power, we're adding X amount of weight, we are reducing your fuel cell size, which then is going to, not yet the size, but actually the capacity, that's going to influence your strategy possibly, blah, blah, blah. No matter how good you are, you're not going to be able to overcome that because of your past history as an excellent racing team. There are many, many excellent racing teams in IMSA. Most are outright awesome. And so I think there was a little bit of an ego check that the Acura Team Penske, maybe more on the Team Penske side than Acura, but I think there was a little bit of a humbling process that went on as they realized that, ooh, okay, different game, gotta learn it. I think we're going to see them come back in 2019 with a better mindset and approach as to how to manage and artfully manage the performance on their cars to gain BOP favor. And with that, I hope we don't have to say the acronym BOP anymore.
Well, let's say it once more, actually, because
it does sing it in the hymn. BOP.
We got BOP. Could be a jingle, couldn't it? Because actually, that does knit beautifully with a question that's sitting down in our little general category from our good friend Floodman11 on the Reddit WC subforum. Yes, Reddit. That's another one we could have a little sting for. About GT3 BOP philosophy. When you BOP for a series, do you try to equalise every car and every track, or equalise performance across a season? He offers the example of the old Audi R8. By that, I'm pretty certain you mean the Audi R8 LMS GT3 rather than the LMP 900 prototype. He's correct that it was a monster in the corners but lacked straight line speed, made it strong over a season, almost impossible to win the Bathurst 12-hour course, the blue ribbon event, the Australian season. Do you sacrifice variation in strengths and weaknesses to allow any mark to be able to win any event? What are our thoughts? I'll have a first crack at that, but I'm keen to hear what you've got to say. I think there are different philosophies with different racing organisations. And I'm hoping, there's something I'm in discussion with at the moment to do with a GTE balance of performance issue at the moment, that we could even bring you a special before the end of the year with the involvement of one of the main factory teams about their philosophy on this one and the ways in which the system is working for the WEC with the new auto BOP system. I think the answer here is, ideally, you of course try to make sure that you've got close competition everywhere. What Flubman's talking about here is, and I remember it well for the 3 years I was at Bathurst as part of the TV team, nothing could touch the Audi across the top of the mountain. But coming down towards the chase, it was just eaten up in a straight line by a number of the other contenders, principally cars like the Bentley and particularly the Nissan GTR. I think the issue here is very simple. It becomes more complex the more different platforms you've actually got. BOP in every race at every track is a near impossibility. And you can see that with some cars coming far stronger at some tracks than others. You have to do it over the season, which makes it all the more counterintuitive when cars seem to be punished for a good performance. I struggle at times with some of the kind of sub-philosophy around BOP. Some people are extremely good at it. I'm very keen to spend some time, for instance, with the SRO's Claude Soumont, who looks after their balance of performance system. I think that would be an excellent subject for a future program, MP, because of course, with the SRO interest in Pirelli World Challenge, that system is going to be very firmly embedded there too, not just in GT3 but also in GT4. The answer is it depends on which system you're using. Generally speaking, they tend to try to do this over a season. Sometimes some of the actions we see between races after a good performance do tend to raise the question as to whether or not that philosophy is quite as inflexible as you might think. You asked about Alex Eichmann. I'm going to ask the question, but I don't know the answer, and I'm hoping you do, MP. Alex asks, was it ever determined what the cause of all the left rear tyre failures at Petit Le Mans, particularly in GTD, were? Seemed very similar to all the failures we saw at Daytona in the prototype class, of which there were legion. I've no clue.
Prototype as well. We had a lot of well, I shouldn't say a lot. We didn't have as many as in the GTD, but we did certainly in prototype. Do you remember many failures in GT Le Mans at Petit Le Mans, Graham? I don't, but I'm not saying that was not able to watch every hour. Was able to listen by and large by IMSA radio when I wasn't able to catch the stream, but okay, so this Alex, I will admit up front, we usually try to be as honest as possible. What I'm about to say does not lack honesty. It just maybe reveals a bit of I had the same thought. Hey, boy, we seem to be ending the season the same way we started the season. A whole heck of a bunch of tire failures, except instead of these failures taking place for the most part up on banking, where we have super loading at crazy high speeds, blowing up, destroying bodywork, just causing mayhem. We didn't see that same kind of panicked mayhem, but we did see a big frequency. Obviously, our podcast is sponsored by a tire company in Cooper, and we love them and have great allegiance to them. I don't say this. We also have friends who are sponsored by the vendor that supplied the tires in question that were failing at Daytona and also at Petit Le Mans. So what I'm about to say, again, this has nothing to do with tire sponsors, allegiances, or otherwise. If the cars were using Coopers and the Coopers were blowing up, I'd be saying the same thing, because if I'm not being honest with you, you guys are not going to trust anything, much less. And then my career tanks. Most reporters know, no matter who's paying your bills, if you lose your audience, you do not have anything of value to offer. So this has nothing to do with who sponsors our podcast, who sponsors other podcasts. This just has to do with having eyes and having a memory, and watching Petit Le Mans early on, thinking, this is starting to feel like we're ending the season the way we started, with consistent or persistent tire problems. And so, to the heart of your question, was it ever determined? I didn't ask. And so that's another part of being honest. I didn't ask. And you want to know why? I didn't care. And so, look, I'm just telling you the way it is. You know why I didn't care? Because they're going away. They've chosen to leave. And we've just recently said some very flowery things about Continental. All the positive things they've done, especially on social media, winning there, the money they have spent with their friends at dinner with racers. Again, nothing but positives there. In recent years, closer to the more recent years, we've heard some more positive things said about their sports car tires, but that was also a pretty significant change from many years, even going back to Grand Am of, wow, okay, this is what your standard is, okay. It's particularly interesting listening to drivers coming in from other championships, whether it's open wheel, other sports cars, stock cars, whatever, and just seeing that kind of wide-eyed, like, oh, wow, okay, this is not what I expected. And so that improved quite a bit. Lots of positive things to say about the growth of what Continental did with their tires in IMSA. Big thumbs up there. The failure parts, I don't know. And the fact that they're going away, the fact that Michelin has been busy testing, that if it sounds like a cop-out, Alex, maybe it is. Again, I don't know. Maybe it is. But while it interested me at the time, there was also a sense of I don't have to worry about, I don't believe we will have to worry about this going forward. And that's based on track history of Michelin, the vendor that's coming in. Now, again, write this day down. It could be another Pruett, you idiot. Why did you say that? You could not possibly be more wrong, but having been in and around Michelin for many, many years, both in the American Le Mans Series, the WEC, etc., routine tire failures has never been part of their narrative. I know we can go back and talk Formula One and the U.S. Grand Prix and blah, blah, different time, different everything. I'm just talking sports cars. Their product, as I've seen it, is one that you can rest easy with, know that it is going to, A, be faster than the competition in most instances, not always, but in most instances, and also failures and whatnot. It's just never really been part of their narrative. So, taking all those things, I don't care, Alex. I know that a different, in my opinion, more true embedded sports car tire supplier is coming in. They were disappointed when they were not chosen to be IMSA's official tire supplier when the series relaunched in 2014. I know I was disappointed as well. Again, having worked in both Grand Am and the ELMS and seen the varying differences in quality and feedback. So I'm just happy that no one was hurt, and also happy to know that, in my opinion, although it's going to be 2019, getting to a place where I feel we should have been all along. And I think we're going to hear that same feedback from folks saying, yeah, okay, this is good. And again, I'm hoping that we have no failures. Obviously, that just hasn't been part of their history. I'll mention as well, it's just a little bit of a sidebar. I don't know if it made it in. We'll see what the editing process looks like in the next issue of Racer Magazine, Lawrence. But one thing that I finished over the weekend or late last week, it's blurring a bit, I apologize, but one of the things that I filed was a sidebar on Michelin in their construction and coming in with prototype tires. And one of the questions that I posed to Ken Payne, Michelin's North American technical director for motorsports, was on this exact fact. Hey, we saw some pretty wickedly scary stuff at Daytona. It's the place where the highest load happens, just all those things on the banking. Have you made any changes to construction in reaction to that, even though it wasn't your tires doing that? And he was very, very forthright, Graham, in saying no. We have not done anything different, nor, and I don't know if this is a new kernel or not, but they're not creating or providing standalone Daytona tires, which has been the norm in IMSA, and I believe before that as well in Grand Am. They're not making a different, stronger, beefier Daytona tire in light of those loads that the prototypes face on the banking. They're just making a tire that they are very confident will stand up to any and all beatings possible at every place they go. So here's a little quote I'll read, which may or may not have made it into the magazine that'll come out here sometime soon. Ken said, "Carcass durability or casing endurance, tire endurance in general, is a first-order consideration for Michelin, no matter what the domain or track is. the tire we're starting with, the LMP2 tire, is quite a robust design, and in fact, we will not have a Daytona-specific tire for the prototypes. So, a little bit of a addition there to what came in with your original question, Alex, but figured it was worth kind of getting into a little bit of the background on mindsets, the fact that I don't give a crap, the fact that we have a new vendor coming in, and what they're planning to at least try and make sure that tire failures are not the holy crap, hit the pause button at Daytona thing. Come January. Let me grab this one, just this very quickly, because I believe Alan's asked this more than once.
He has.
If not Alan, someone else has for sure. Said a few episodes ago, Marshall, you mentioned that the Detroit Grand Prix in Belle Isle would be an event not to attend in person compared to the other tracks. With the recent announcement of changes made to the spectator viewing, do you see the changes making a significant impact to spectator viewing / experience? I like the place. I've always said that. So my comment on, I think it was, context of it, would there be one to skip or exactly what it was. It wasn't just me going on a rant saying, don't go there, I hate it. I actually love the place. My colleagues make fun of me that I'm the one guy that likes going to Detroit and likes Belle Isle. It's just having walked around a lot of it, it's either just long straights that, there's not a whole lot there. A couple of, for the most part, rinky-dink corners, and some of the most interesting places where folks were able to view, where action happened, spin, some other stuff. Folks had changed that, so there was really no grandstand or viewing capabilities there. From what I've heard, for some of the changes, some of that could be coming back. So, yeah, I hope, Alan, that it is a place that, whether you're an IndyCar fan, IMSA fan, or both, will be something that you feel like, cool, I was not only able to walk around this park and see some racing, but I actually got to see it in some corners where it felt like it was fun, and I could see some really good stuff happening. With where it had been recently, they'd taken away some key things that really, unless you were fortunate enough to be in one of the hospitality suites, just general fan viewing, I would say, had taken a step back. So I think, from what I've heard and seen, that's going to improve a bit. So I guess we'll say I wind back a little bit of my comment, knowing that some changes are happening.
We've got the stuff I've curated into kind of IMSA will actually one, and it's the final one that actually is rather more PWC world, although there might reasonably be a question about whether or not this might be to do with IMSA. It's Daniel Tripp, and he says whether or not there's any scuttlebutt on a team switching to the Callaway Corvette GT3 in 2019 when availability opened for the chassis in 2018. There was almost an expectation of a mad rush. Other than a couple of races in PWC earlier this year, there's been nothing. There seems to be some history here between you two, because he says, P.S. I love you too, MP. Let's hope my jealous red-headed wife doesn't find out, or we're both dead men.
Well, no,
that's the kind of thing I would expect to see written on a bathroom door.
Well, I apologize. I've forgotten the question that Daniel asked most recently, but whatever it was, I loved it, and it was awesome. So that's why I just profess my love for him, which, look, I'm a grown man. I'm confident in all aspects of my life. I'm comfortable telling a complete stranger that I love him, and the fact that no restraining orders... I think that
makes you the better man. Better man.
There were no restraining orders that showed up in the mail, so I guess I'm successful here. This is all you, my friend.
For me,
yes.
Well, I think the answer on Callaway is, look, the PWC campaign just fell short on the budgetary front. The car looks awesome. Absolutely fantastic. It is, though, thus far proven in sprint racing rather than endurance racing. I think the team behind construction of the car would certainly agree with that. I hope you get the opportunity to see the car in the carbon, because there's plenty of carbon to be seen. Looks awesome. Sounds absolutely awesome. Is there any a rumour around of anybody racing it in the US next year. None that I've heard at the moment. I hope that something actually does emerge, because I think it's a very worthy contender. Fine people in Germany, rather oddly, that build the Callaway Corvette GT3. Reeves Callaway still the man behind it, but the organisation that builds the car is based in Europe. I hope we see more of it, because I think the thing is a fabulous looking piece. But no, I'm afraid no intel to actually give you at this stage.
Speaking of fabulous looking beasts, it's time to move on to the WEC world, where our fabulous beast, one Graham of the Goodwin tribe, is an expert. So let me field this, let me pose the question so you can answer it. So I'm just going to get to be question asking monkey for a little bit here. This one comes in from Damien Tubbert. It says, what are the chances of Brendan Hartley getting a top drive in the WC in 2019, and with whom?
Right. Well, I think the answer is if he can fit a WC campaign into what I expect is going to be a busy year for Brendan, then frankly, I think they'll be at Formula de Saltley Q. He's a fantastic race driver, a individual of high quality as well. I think the first offer for him is going to be Formula E, without a shadow of a doubt. One of a very large number of WC regulars that I think has got a future with Formula Milk Float, which I think is fabulous for him. It's full factory effort. He's of that quality. As for who we might find a ride with in WC, honestly, you look to the kind of the guys who are actually in the leading LMP1 privateers at the moment, and I think you're looking at that. Brendan, as far as I'm aware, retains a Porsche factory contract. He has done a little bit of GT racing in the past. I don't expect that's where we're going to see him as a full season driver, but he did, for instance, the Dubai 24 Hours 2 years ago from memory. But I expect he will be busy. I expect him to actually at least get a shot at a Formula E campaign, and I would not be remotely surprised if we see him on people's wish list for any LMP1 drives that might come a-knocking. There's another one, actually, which is about another LMP1 driver from Effective Sprinkles, which sounds like a slogan of some description, but is Alonso going to do the next season at WEC? The answer is that Tota would like him to. I know they're keen on retaining Fernando Alonso. Whether or not that comes to pass, I think it's going to be entirely his choice. It's as simple as that. We've already had, and I know you've dealt with this, in some depth on the IndyCar podcast, the machinations of what's going on at McLaren, whether or not it be to do with Formula One, or in particular case for the IndyCar podcast, IndyCar or not, Alonso or not. We get into this podcast, hypercar or not, and if it is a yes, when is it going to be? I think the answer is we're going to be some while away from it. There will be other answers, I am sure, that will give the same kind of inclination on this one, which is, it is quite an odd thing in the WEC paddock at the moment, which is that this is the time of year where I would be asking teams, what are you doing next year? But we're only halfway through the season. So it is kind of quite an odd time. So asking anybody, it's just a really easy opportunity for someone to turn around and say, we've no idea. And I think the same would be true for Fernando Alonso at the moment. He doesn't yet know which way this season is going to go. Yes, we can all make our minds up about whether or not we'll get to team orders, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is we are in racing terms halfway through the WEC season. In points terms, we're not yet, because of course Sebring attracts more points in a 6-hour race. So it's a little early to say. The one thing I can say with certainty is Toyota have made it clear that they would like to retain him.
Let's see.
Go on, throw me another.
All right, I'm lobbing it as hard as I can. We are going to stay with Reddit, and Echo Kilo 97 says, do you think we will see a grandfathering period of the current P1 or even P2 cars once the new regulations come into place? Also with the new hypercar regulations, also known as car as we've lovingly dubbed it, coming into force, to expect GTE to suffer as Mark's move from promoting their mid-tier sports cars to their premier models?
It's an interesting series of questions, isn't it? And I think the answer at the moment is impossible to be accurate with, because you don't know yet how many cars you're going to see in this new Premier, what we can only really call hypercar or car class at the moment. Once we get to know that, if it's a low number, then of course there's going to be more pressure to grandfather those cars. I asked the question in conversation with a number of senior people last time out in Fuji, where we had the opportunity to talk to them in some depth about what the proposals are, and they were very clear that, look, is it on the table? I think it's potentially on the table to grandfather those cars, but they're not going to know whether or not that's going to be desirable, necessary, or whatever, until we know whether or not we've got 2, 4, or 24 of the new hypercar cars for 2020, 2021. As for LMP2, there is a reality here. With the performance levels that are now being envisaged for the new cars, that's getting perilously close to the kind of ultimate lap time that we've seen in qualifying, at least at Le Mans, from the LMP2 cars. That will likely see a bit of a dialing back of those cars, whether or not it's a reduction in the power of the Gibson engines, or more likely, I think, a bit of weight here and there. I've said, I think, last week, and it caused a degree of comment and controversy, that in one way solves a bit of a problem potentially for the WEC, in that at the moment we're heading towards a position, and I think you've seen the same in IMSA MP, where the dominance of the Orica chassis is becoming a bit of a concern. There's a bit of play going on at the moment, particularly in the LMS, with Ligier team, United Autosport, switching to the Michelin tyre and finding actually that very much their liking, winning the last race out, albeit on a wet track. But yes, I think we're going to see some changes in LMP2 if Hypercar delivers the cars they hope it will. Don't know yet on the grandfathering. Then there's this bigger question, and it's a great question from Echo Kilo, around GTE. Do I expect those numbers to suffer as a result of hypercar? This is the great unknown, isn't it? Do I think we're going to see terribly many factories running both? No. Do I think that's going to mean that they're going to be looking to convert some of their customers to pro customers? Yes, because they're going to want to keep that GTE customer base alive, and it's almost impossible to do that with the Pro-Am, GT-Am side of things. Why? Because those cars have to be to design at least a year old. You need a pro team to be running them in year one for there effectively to be a car that is deliverable for Am in year two. So I think that's something they'll be all keeping an eye on, rule makers and the factories. It's not yet clear exactly who that might affect. We know that, of course, Aston Martin are amongst the ones that you might reasonably expect. They've been heavily engaged in the conversations about the regulations. But there might be others. There are others that have been in the room. There are others built, so BMW we know. Ferrari, I think, have been in there to keep an eye on the technical regulations and the direction more than performing an orderly queue to put together a factory program. I don't believe that's in the offing. But then you've got the big unknown. I know it comes into other questions we're going to have later, which are these manufacturers that, on the back of information that's been sent out to a whole range of OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, that have asked for a board-level presentation of these regulations. We don't know who they are. We absolutely don't know who they are. Whether or not they are small boutique manufacturers or whether or not they're huge multinationals, I think will become known as we get more chance to take people from the ACO into a darkened room and beat them with sticks. Once we've found that out, then I think we're in a better position to judge whether or not this has got the potential for an immediacy of success, whether or not it might be a longer haul, having to wait for year two of hypercar, or whether or not these regulations might be in trouble. The reality right now is I don't believe there's terribly many people better informed perhaps than I am in terms of exactly what's happening here.
The ego on this guy. Oh, I tell you.
Simply because I have been in the room and I have spoken to just about everybody that has been in that room and that's actually responsible for putting those rules together. I've spoken to a very large number now of people. The reality is there are questions that they're not yet answering. If they're not telling me, They're very likely not telling any other journalist without a French accent. And the reality there is that anybody making their minds up today that this is success or failure is wrong. That we're not there yet. I think we'll know by the time we get to the early months of next year. But right now, I can't call it. I can't call whether or not it's... I can tell you right now, there's one factory that have already told me. We'll be publishing details of that in the coming days on Daily Sports Car on Racer.com, that has given a very positive reaction to the regulations and has effectively said, yes, we're there, we're in the room, and we want to do this. But the reality beyond that is that there's a lot of decisions still to be made. It's going to be a very dynamic situation indeed for the coming months.
I'll just add this in quickly, and we'll also note that to get through as many questions as possible, we do our best to do a one-question, one-answer format. Sometimes we do two folks speaking on the topic here. I'll just say from a practical standpoint, good old EK97, that the real answer of grandfathering is going to come in how many hypercar, car entries we see on the grid. If we're talking there are 4 for this new formula, total cars, just truly 4 of these new vehicles, I would say yes, absolutely, there will be some form of grandfathering because you, as we mentioned earlier, you really cannot kick off something new and suffer from a dreadfully low car count. Not for a big globe-trotting, high-profile, high-prestige series like the FIA WEC that competes at Le Mans. So I really think the grandfathering aspect comes down to the subscription rate. If there are enough cars to populate a grid, even if it's not crazy, even if it's 6, 7, 8 cars, the question of grandfathering might go away. But if it's lower than that, if they were to go forward with a new formula that actually only had 1 or 2 manufacturers opting in with just a couple of cars, I think even that should kick them back into saying, all right, hold on, all right, we floated the idea, don't build anything, don't machine anything, we're going to go back and have a think, because if you've decided a change must happen and folks do not pick up on it, then that change is not the right one, and don't force folks through a bad idea that struggles from the outset and fails. So who knows? I think that's one of the reasons, Graham, why although you and a few others, our friend probably Marcus Scherg is one of them, there are a few that I know are trusted implicitly with the most recent and accurate information as to what's happening here. I still don't have full confidence this is going to see the light of day, this formula. Not until we hear that there are enough manufacturers saying, yes, we are in, and it's with enough cars to make this competition meaningful. Despite all best intentions, it does come down to how many folks that raise their hand and say, sign me up, I'm in. And until you get to there, it's all talk.
I think you're absolutely right, but equally well, I think we do at the moment have a bit of a divided camp in sports car racing. It's, I think, quite unhealthy, and what we've got are a number of people, and some of them very publicly, basically saying it'll never work, and a number of other people being dramatically over optimistic about it.
Yeah, and we're not saying it's not going to work. That we've never said that. It's just a case of, again, if you and I decide to sell a new product, absolutely, we're not going to make any grand claims that it's going to work until we get a feel if there's a proper market for that product. And if we do, then great, we're selling it and fantastic. But if not, then we need to ask, do we need to look at tweaking the product or trying something altogether different?
Well, I look at it in terms of the ginger and white cat that I'm looking at through the window at the moment, looking at my dinner, which is sitting next to me. She's looking at it with devilment in her eyes. And I remind listeners of what I said on the show a couple of weeks ago, where we had to take my beloved DSC cat to the vets, and we didn't think she was going to come home. And and part of your mind, you kind of you've almost got ready for that disappointment, that crushing disappointment that your little pal's not going to come home. And as it turned out, it was basically that she just had a big poo that wouldn't move. So I'm not trying to say in any way that hypercar is a big poo. What I'm saying here is,
yes, you
don't
are.
let your mind Don't make your mind it's going to be a big disappointment yet, because you just don't know. I have to tell you, mildly disturbed and not a little disappointed in colleagues that seem to take pleasure in bad news coming the way of one kind of set of rules rather than another. It's not for, we said earlier, do we try to push things along in this game? Yes, we do. It's not for us to take sides at all. The reality is the quality of the product, the quality of the rule set, the quality of what's actually produced will decide. That will decide whether or not these major manufacturer boards will sign off the 8-figure budgets that would be required to deliver these things. And there is a reality that they've determined this is what the FIA World Endurance Championship requires to take it forward to the next stage in its evolution. And to hear people in my business talking about, oh, it's dead, it'll never work, fine. You might be right. And if you are right, then that'll be disappointing, won't it? It'll be disappointing that will go away, and something which has produced some of the best racing on the planet in the last half a decade will no longer be with us. I don't believe we're anywhere remotely close to that yet, and I do find it difficult when we've got people in the business, whether or not that's in the business of the media or any other part of this business, effectively wishing it dead. That's ridiculous.
Is it bad that we want those people to go away?
I'm getting pretty bored of hearing it, is the honest answer. And I'm equally well getting bored of being told by one or two of those people in conversation that in some way I'm tub-thumping for one rather than the other. Not at all. I will go and we will cover racing wherever we can around the planet. That's part of why we do this this podcast, MP. But there is a reality that I can only actually physically put boots on the ground where we have a budget to do that. It doesn't imply favoritism. It implies availability of the resource to do it. And that is exactly the same as the teams that actually you'll find on the grid. They'll race where they can actually find a budget to race and where they can find those customers. And all I'd say here to anybody that has got a fixed position on these things is there is a reality here, guys. You don't know yet. Let's wait and see. Ask yourself the question. If someone had said to you, let's say 4 years ago, what we're going to do is we're going to replace this with an LMP2 car, a spec car with a different engine and a body kit. Why is that different? Yes, it makes sense in some terms. In other terms, when you put it in derogatory terms, it doesn't sound that good. But it is giving IMSA absolutely brilliant racing at the moment. Give it time to breathe and give these organisations an opportunity to make a determination on the basis of the rule sets they've been discussing and the conversations they've been having about the commercial opportunities that come from it. And let's not go down the road of saying, oh, well, it's outrageous. They're only doing this because they want the WEC. Of course they want the WEC. It's their product. It's no different from the decision-making process, the correct decision-making process that was made by IMSA in developing the DPI concept, which at times has put them very much at odds with the ACO. We are taking two different courses here. I happen to think that if both are successful, we could be another golden age of it. But let's wait and see. We don't know. I think we will have a very few months to find out whether or not we're going to get factories stepping up and showing us, their idea of what this actually means in reality when we get to 2020 and the 2021 Le Mans 24 Hours. That's my thoughts on it.
We usually get one MP or GG soapbox moment per episode. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Again, I don't know. But I don't know if we get both happening in every episode, but I know for sure we just got a really good GG soapbox moment, so I love that. And it's funny you should just mention what you just mentioned, because our friend Stathis Coco said, I'm really fed up with the negativity of certain individuals about the future of a category that's not even born. It's ironic, though, the fact that that are either not employed by that series or given invites for meetings. Hey, Should we crack open one of our general questions that's kind of aligned with that, or save that for later?
I tell you what, you can kind of run naked through the cornfield of questions here.
You just made our entire listener base throw up. Thanks, man. Let's see. Yeah, and we're running a little long this episode. We've been trying of late to stick to an hour and a half, but I'm enjoying this. I hope you all are enjoying this, and if not, maybe you can run over to Graham's house and stare through the window with the cat, just ogling his dinner. Let's go to our friend Andrew Baca. Good old Baxter says, with the car regulations getting finalized, there are performance caps being placed on the cars. How effective will these caps be? We've heard about caps on engine, aero, and weight distribution, but not on suspensions. Given IMSA's issues with balancing DPI and their open shock development, should we be concerned? This is referencing the fact that the spec LMP2 WC cars had effectively no open fun time with damper development, and therefore that's certainly an area where DPIs have had an advantage. He says, is there anything to prevent a team from gaining a significant pace advantage over those operating at the recommended budget by building $1 million dampers and running the car in a 7-post shaker all day, every day? That's a great question, Andrew, and it comes back to one that's been asked for many years in a variety of championships that have either embraced some sort of cost-cutting, budget limits, or at least the hope that folks don't spend themselves into oblivion and so on. And it's hey, we're going to try and do this, be responsible, not everybody, don't go nuts, okay? And we're going to try and be the adults in the room and police things a little bit and make sure you don't go nuts. It does come back to what you can effectively police, though. We've seen in Formula One where there's, they've tried to get as deep as CFD and how many hours of CFD time that teams can use, and they're policing of it in some way, shape, or form. I would say, and I would fear, that in order to truly police such things with these future hypercar, car regulations, if they're going to do this in a meaningful way that does keep teams, one from being truly better than the other, they would have to go to those ends. They would have to install, cameras, some sort of data link to the 7-post rig, and, you name it. We're also talking damper dynos, gearbox dynos, all the things that, that are used, both, physical machines that are used, computing machines that are doing CFD, whatever else. To properly do this, you need to get your fingers into everything, watch everything, have the ability to police everything. Then there are questions of how could teams circumvent this, blah, blah, blah. If, we're using your 7-post shaker all day long example, if that were to happen and that there were some form of data link where teams had to, in order to enable their 7-post rig, they had to log on to, an FIA-based site or server, which then enabled the machine to function. Sure, could they do that? Could they also, if they wanted to, have a completely separate laptop or desktop computer installed that actually ran the thing, so you effectively have a dummy that looks like it's only doing a limited amount while the other one is truly controlling it the other 23 hours of a day? I would say it really comes back to a question of who is involved. Are we talking big manufacturers? How much money are they wanting to spend? And how willing are they to stick to the general mindset of, let's not spend ourselves into oblivion? Rarely, Graham, do we get complete unification on that manner. Yes, we're all going to be good global citizens. None of us are going to spend $1 trillion to beat the others. There's usually someone that says, yeah, sure, we're in, and then they completely do the opposite. So I just don't know how far the ACO, the FIA, and the WEC wants to extend themselves into this policing platform. If they don't go insane, and insanity would essentially be required to do all of these things, I can guarantee you that our friends in Cologne at Toyota will be having 48-hour-a-day shaker rig sessions and just, again, going mad. One other thing I'll add in here quickly, Andrew, before we move on to the next question, is, there's also a lesson to be learned from other series that have gone in similar directions. I'll use IndyCar because it's something I know very well. They said, hey, to save costs, to do all of these things, we're going to go to a spec chassis, a single chassis that everyone must use. And most things are spec. Great. And has that reduced costs? No. It's done the opposite. Budgets have only gone up. And it's not necessarily because the parts and pieces that they've purchased are more. No, if anything, the costs to buy a chassis have gone down. I realize that, when we're talking about car here, it's people building their own everything. It's effectively bespoke car. So I realize that it's not a like-for-like comparison on the hard parts and pieces side. But I do know that when you have something that says, let's reduce, let's cap, let's limit, what's the one place where budgets start to run amok? It's in everything you just mentioned. The off-track testing, because that's the other thing, too. We normally get, Graham, right? Oh, we're slashing test days. One crew member can look at the track for 12 minutes, and that's it. That's the only time you actually get to go to the track between races. So what happens? Well, teams say, okay, cool. Well, we can't go pound around Aragon for weeks on end to find out everything we want to know, to make our car better, try a whole bunch of different things. Where does all that money go? It goes into off-track testing, virtual testing, and the money spent there is phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's the other part, and you go, well, so is it just purely teams, IndyCar teams, spending a ton in their own shops or at specialist places to learn things about these tools that they can't take to the track like they used to and learn on their own? Well, that's part of it, but there's also the other part of the expense structure, and that is, so you've got all these really cool, expensive tools you've bought that you're going to use to educate yourself more, make your car faster through off-track testing. Yeah, you don't go and then hire a guy fresh out of your local junior college who was trying to major in philosophy. No, you're hiring PhD level folks, mathematicians and this and that, and engineers of this and that, training and education. You're also spending a ton on people because you need the smartest possible people to try and not only come up with the best ideas to test, but also to facilitate these tests. Smarter people, making smarter testing, making smarter changes and developments. That's where the money gets spent. And so it's a little bit of a shell game. It's a little bit of a con job of like, hey, which one is the budget saving under? And you turn over all the shit and you realize, oh, okay, yeah, it really isn't there. Maybe the building the car parts less, but you told us we couldn't go to the track like we used to, and that's where we're saving money. We have just doubled or tripled what we probably would have spent by having to move it all in-house. So unless there's a way, Andrew, for the FIA WEC and ACO to get their fingers in there and prevent that from happening, this is still going to be a very expensive endeavor because that's what we have seen in other series where limitations have been implemented. It takes place in the shop, in specialist facilities, and it's brutally expensive.
I've just done a quick look through the remaining questions we got for our ACO world. And there's two or three themes that come out from this one. There's a couple of really quick questions I would just want to clear up first. And if forgive me, MP, what I'm going to do is try to kind of rattle through. The first thing to say here is I think a couple of people have possibly misinterpreted, and that can only be my fault because I think you're reading my copy around this stuff. The cap, the only thing that I'm aware is capped in financial terms is the commercial cost to a privateer of the hybrid drive system at €2 million per season for a two-car team. The budget that is being set here, this €20 million budget, is effectively what they're saying, and 16 million, by the way, for a privateer car or team, rather two-car team. That is effectively, you can do it for this. That's what they're saying. Is there an expectation the factories will do it for that? No. What they're saying is that the cap is on the performance side of things, and they're doing that through a variety of means. Certainly the engine control, but particularly the hybrid drive performance cap and the aero development side of things. Doesn't move away from your point earlier about things like damper development. We haven't seen whether or not that's in the regulations yet. Coming back to that in a moment. 2 or 3 quick points to clear up. Mark Pemberton asks, has the Toyota LMP1 team ever tested at Sebring before? Not aware that they have, but as MP quite rightly says, their technology for the simulator is otherworldly. Let me give you a figure for that. A couple of 3 years ago, visited TMG in Cologne, of course, their ex-Formula One facility. Whilst there were a lot of guys in red T-shirts with Shell on them from a Formula One team that shall remain nameless, other than the fact it begins with F, ends in I, and has got Arara in the middle of it.
Force India Arara? Force India Arara.
Because the wind tunnel was more advanced there than theirs was, but had a chance to spend some time with the guys who were looking at the simulator. It was one of their race engineers that also runs the simulator between race weekends. One of the race drivers, I think it was Nico Lapierre, there that particular week, and had a chance to speak to them about just how accurate the simulator technology is. And what was told was they don't and can't do endurance testing on the simulator because it can't simulate the G-forces, etc. But in terms of setup of the car, the optimum setup of the car and the changes they can make, he told me he would expect and would be expected to replicate the lap times he'd given in ideal conditions on the simulator to a real track to within a tenth of a second. That's how accurate that simulator technology is. Equally well, on the one occasion I was given full access into the Porsche 919 hybrid garage towards the end of that campaign, 2 replicated engineering teams. On the right, the guys actually running the cars. On the left, the guys gathering data for the simulators. Same number of people gathering data for simulation and also effectively run the cars. That's the kind of level of resource that goes into the simulator technology that MP was just talking about. So note that I think Toyota hasn't actually in real world been to Sebring. Who we got here? The Advantage, hello mate, Richard, has the Ginetto LMP1 program gone the same way as Monty Python's parrot? Beautifully voiced. The answer is not yet. I know they're working on some kind of recovery program. Whether or not it at this stage can be with the TRSM outfit, I think is becoming less and less likely. But spoke to a couple of very senior people on Ginetta in the last couple of 3 days, and I know they're looking at what the options are moving forward. You don't give up a multi-million-pound project lightly, and they're not going to. It's frustrating for them. They're fully well aware of where they could have actually delivered better and performed better. They're working on what they can with the WEC, because of course that's the only place the car can realistically run. What they can actually do to get the car back to the track before the end of the current season. It's tricky, it's edgy, and I hope they make it, because I think the car's got some potential. Tom Bacon asks, will the arrest of the head of BR engineering have any long-term impact on the future of the SMP BR1 project? I think, Tom, that's a misunderstanding of a news story that's been doing the rounds about Boris Rotenberg, who has not been arrested. He is the BR of BR1. And is also the head of SMP Racing and also one of the co-owners of SMP Bank. And this is to do with the fact that Boris has been, since the Russian actions in Crimea, in Ukraine, has been subject to US sanctions. And that is a knock-on effect of a number of Scandinavian banks withdrawing banking facilities to Boris Rotenberg and his companies. That is subject to some legal action at the moment. It's not the first time that this has happened. I've no doubt it won't be the last. Those with slightly longer memories might remember the switch of the previous car, rather confusingly called the BR01, that was the LMP2 car, from Michelin to Dunlop tyres mid-season. That was because one of the previous issues that had impacted upon Boris Rotenberg was that he couldn't, for an extended period of time, do business with Goodyear Dunlop because they're a US company. That meant he couldn't sign, neither could his team, neither could any company it was associated with, couldn't sign a contract with a US-based manufacturing company. That was sorted over time. The BR01 was switched to Dunlop's and was a lot more competitive. This is the inevitable outcome when someone is subject to major international sanctions, as Boris Rotenberg is. Do I expect it to have long-lasting impact on the race programme? It hasn't so far, and those sanctions have been in place for the last 4 years. Beyond that...
Well, hold on. You've just given us a piece of information, Graham, but not the full story. You said that Boris Rotenberg is the BR and BR1. Who's the one?
He's the one.
Hanging. Oh, he's the one as well?
It's like the Neo in the Matrix of LMP1 privateer. I'm not quite sure who Agent Smith is. It might be Gerard Neveu. That would be slightly confusing, wouldn't it?
And Sam Smith, possibly, but
no, it can't be Sam.
No.
By the way, get well soon, Sam, who's managed to ride his bike into a fence, doing lasting damage. I'm afraid, so a very battered and bruised sniffer.
Also, a poor choice on his part to sign up for the riding a bike into a fence competition. I mean, it is hard to determine a winner, but he clearly
won.
Clearly, yes. I don't know what you get for a trophy. Is it a medallion?
A broken rib,
a piece of wood?
No, it's a broken rib and severe bruising. Okay. So he's uncomfortable. I have made sure that he is reassured that we won't be mentioning it much when I see him in Shanghai in a couple of weeks' time. Not much at all, Sam. At all, honest, promise. Beyond that, MP, aside from Right Turn Lover, hello mate, asking, is Andrea Pizzitola the best sports car driver ever? He hasn't been fired by Roman Rubisanos across the entire season. Well, bearing in mind, we've not had the entire season yet.
Nor is the full season needed. It was clearly.
Indeed.
Anytime he signs up, first of all, he's going to have the best name in that championship. Therefore, he's the best driver. I believe that's the way it works.
He's fabulous. He's done a fantastic job. They are basically champions-elect in the LMS, secured enough points last season. Does beg the question, though, if he annoys Roman this weekend, will Roman drop him and make himself the sole champion? I don't want to put that doubt in your mind, Andrea, but let's wait and see. I'm sure it'll all be fine. It'll be no problem. Beyond that, there are a number of themes, and I'm going to try and wrap them up with questions from David Faulkner, Jason Fitch, Stuart Hart, Right Turn Lover again, Chris Alphaby, Gary Scholnatz. They'll come to Gary's later, and from MBO. It comes down to a number of general themes which are around LMP1, around privateers, about activation, etc. David Faulkner asked about thoughts on activation expenditure that we've referenced with regard to ACO manufacturers. How many boutique brands would it take to get close to VAG or Porsche levels? Surely 4 or 5 would go close. Probably not. We're talking here about global forces in the marketplace against manufacturers producing tiny numbers of a boutique brand. The reality in terms of competition on track is that, of course, 4 or 5 would do it. In terms of what that would mean for the level of expenditure required to fill a gap from one of those manufacturers, the answer is 4 or 5 might do it, but I think it would be something of a stretch. The Stuart Hart asks when the hypercar regs are ratified by the FIA in December, which is when we expect that will happen. Are we expecting official communication with the ACO, ref entrance and plans, etc.? Don't have much time to digest them. I am already talking to the ACO about a better way of making sure that we've got a better understanding of those in December. We've already got a reasonably good tag on direction, but as far as the details are concerned, there's a lot more to come, and unfortunately the way in which it's communicated by the World Motorsports Council means we don't get a very full explanation of what it is that they've actually done. But we are working with them, Stuart, as a group of interested people in what happens with the WC moving forward, to make sure that there's a better level of understanding available as quickly as possible. Number of people asking about whether or not this marks a further abandonment of privateers. Well, number one, we don't yet know whether or not there's going to be a grandfathering. Number two, the key points here is that we're talking about a budget of around €16 million for a two-car team for a full WEC season. That's helped in no small part by this commercial availability of the hybrid drive system. It comes in a little over what a number of people have been told by, for instance, Hugh de Schonack, that might be the max for a privateer effort. I think last time I spoke to Hugh, he said 15. They've come out at 16. I think now we've had an opportunity to see a little bit more detail. Shanghai might be a good time to go and speak to the likes of Rebellion and see what their response is to that. Remains to be seen too as to whether or not any of the manufacturers might actually help to subsidise more than two cars, for instance, on a grid. Who knows whether or not Toyota may decide to put a Toms in there, or might look to actually help bridge the gap for someone like Rebellion, who, let's face it, they've had a previous customer relationship with. I'm not saying that from the position of knowledge, just putting it out there that might well be a possibility. So wait and see. It does at the moment look a stretch for privateers, that kind of level. MBO asks why manufacturers seen as being so important for LMP1 and car. Catering to them, vast cost brings just the same old boom bust cycle. Couldn't one make the argument encouraging privateers as a more sustainable way forward? Manufacturers come and go, privateers tend to stay put. He asks as well, what's the exact relationship between the ACO and FIA when it comes to Le Mans, ELMS, Asian Le Mans Series, etc.? Let's deal with that one first. ACO and FIA have a joint enterprise, LMEM, headed up by Gerard Neveu, which runs the FIA WEC. That is a partnership between the FIA and the ACO. The ACO retain the ownership of the Le Mans 24 Hours as the full rights holder for that race, but the answer on that front, it is a joint venture between the two organisations that carries through into the rule set too. Why are manufacturers so important? It's a world championship. It's vastly expensive, and in order to actually keep that thing rolling, you need that opportunity to get better marketing for the whole product. It's a different way of doing it than IMSA do with their manufacturer contribution. They do they not, MP? Depending on the size of manufacturer that you are, there's a sliding scale of contribution you effectively put into the marketing pots for the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. That's, you'll recall in the past we've had those conversations about why it is that Aston Martin, or why it is that other manufacturers in GTD that could be there aren't there. It's because they've not been ready, willing, or able to sign up for that deal, or indeed find customers that are prepared to do that either. So the answer on the manufacturer side is it's a massive operation. To do that effectively, what you need are the big buck payers to subsidise some of the rest of this. That tends to come back to the debate, do we need a world championship? My response to that was, why shouldn't we have a world championship if you can make it sustainable? It's at the moment not a very virtuous circle. They're attempting to fix that position, and that's why they're looking for a more sustainable 4 to 5 year cycle for manufacturer operation within it. Anything else in amongst what we've got there, MP, apart from Gary Shalnat's question that takes your eye?
Not really. I'm feeling like we need to get to our close with the fun and general and that kind of good stuff here.
Let's segue into that with Gary's question, which is,
I think it's Guy, by the way.
I do apologise. It does say Guy. Guy shall not do it. I do apologise. If hypercar, would use past supercar shapes, what shape would you pick?
Saline S7.
Ooh.
That just always looks good. It always... actually, I don't know if it's a supercar. It was a funky car purely for the sake of land speed record. I would actually say, I hope someone at GM is listening and chooses to enter car, the old Oldsmobile Aerotech. that AJ Foyt drove from, what was it, 86 or so, which was a March IndyCar chassis with a four-cylinder Olds quad, four-cylinder turbo with 8 trillion pounds of boost, and then a full prototype body and very significant underbody aero added to it. I would love to see the racing version of that. Yeah, I even think, Graham, that even though it's 40-ish years old or however old, I still think it might look futuristic, though. I still think
it's a stunning thing. Do look it up, by the way, if you've not heard of this thing. My introduction to this, apart from seeing a little bit of news footage of it, was Matchbox did a version of it. Just a little Matchbox car. My son, now 30 years old, had a number of those, and they were just a stunning little piece of kit. But, that's a good call. As for road-going opportunities, well, sort of the same era. The Jaguar XJ220, I think, is a stunning-looking car. Oddly enough, I've only ever seen one of those on the road, and spookily, actually saw it not 5 minutes from where I now stand and live, but years before I lived here. I was on my way out of London, saw the car parked up, and remember stopping on a dreadfully rainy day, waiting for someone to come out of their house and drive the thing away, just so I could see it move. Amazing looking car, but yeah, something along those lines, a Lamborghini Countach, something like that. That might be fun. Just because,
I think you're onto something. If we had the Countach, we had a Ferrari Testarossa, maybe this old Aerotech. We could almost have a subdivision Miami Vice,
I was about to say
drug runner type. Yeah. Maybe someone could, and granted, this is a little more hillbilly, but that's fine. We could also have kind of a Pontiac Trans Am, Smokey and the Bandit edition as well. Oh, we're on to something here. It might not be good, but it's something.
Well, oddly enough, it brings to mind that we're going to Portimao, as I said, this weekend for the European Le Mans Series. And some years ago, when we went there with the old ELMS Le Mans Series, we had a support race, which was a locally run Ford Transit Cup. Now, you turn up, and these things are bog standard, manual transmission, Ford Transit. I think there were diesels as well, and just painted in racing colours. Now, here's the rub. Were that a UK-based championship, I'm absolutely 1,000,000% certain that one of them would be an ice cream van, one would be a police van, one would be a prison van. We've actually had this happen. We did have the VW Cup with a VW Caddy van based on the Polo chassis, and on occasion that thing has raced as a police van and as various other, hilarious outcomes. Yeah, there's a part of me that really likes the concept. I just want to see success here. I want to see the good people that, to be blunt, have been very good custodians for the rule set, just recover their balance and find a way forward for a part of the sport that I absolutely adore.
I love it. Well, let's move to fun, and I'll grab the first two. The first one I can answer somewhat quickly, and the second one I think might be a one question, two answer. I'm going to grab Scott Christie. Sorry, Scott. Hopefully that wasn't uncomfortable. Craig Lowndes wins the Enduro Cup. Where should he go racing next? I'll tell you where he should, because why not tell another human being what he should do with his own life? He needs to come to America, and I'll also tip my hand a little bit and say, know Craig a little bit. Don't pretend that we're good friends by any means, but have tried to help him over the past couple of years to let him know about a few opportunities, whether he's inquired or I've sent him a note or two saying, hey, you might talk to such and such. And we may or may not have had that similar kind of go-round here within the past couple of weeks. So, granted, he's Australian, races in the Australian Super Cup Championship. It's by and large a happy place. It's happy people. What we often hear, Graham, folks coming over who've raced in Europe, who race in North America for the first time, whoa, the culture is so different. I love it here. It's warm and friendly and happy. That's new to me. I want to do more of it. I don't know if we hear that so much from folks coming up from Australia or New Zealand, because, again, they tend to be fairly happy people in a beautiful place on the planet. But I do know that, even though culturally it might not be a huge change for Craig, I still just think he would really enjoy it. And knowing that he is such an amazing driver, plus a really warm guy, I think he would just be a beautiful addition to anything that IMSA happens to offer. So, plus he's a legend, plus he's amazing. So, that's where I think he should go. And I guess the day that Craig says, "Hey, Marshall, I'm going to let you dictate my future. I'm going to go race wherever you say I should." Well, then maybe that'll happen, but maybe it won't. Let's get to the next question.
I'm just going to give you a really quick answer to that one. I think he should go and race wherever the hell he likes. He's been a fantastic ambassador for the sport in Australia. I thoroughly enjoyed the couple of occasions I've sat with him in Oz and at the Spa 24 Hours. I'd love to see him anywhere as long as I can be there too.
I'll maybe leave this. You tell me, but I think maybe you should open the first answer to this question. I'll take the latter half if that's okay. Nathan Brown, if I may be so bold, there seems to be a lot of mentions and, quote, shots across the bow about a specific clickbaity sports car website, which probably has some numbers in the URL that may add up to the number of days in the year. What's the vibe like in the press room? Does it look like a scene out of West Side Story? Is it mostly all in good fun? So we're trying to be honest here, Graham. How honest should we be?
Where do we go with this one?
Yeah, because you try and paint. How's this? When we talk about Dinner with Racers, for example, with Sean Heckman and Ryan Eversley, we give them the business whenever we can on social media, give them a hard time. Oh, my God, Heckman's personality is the worst, and Eversley, just a terrible human being. That's all pure sarcasm. That's all done out of love and respect and warmth. Absolutely. Because they would be mad if we just said, "Oh, they're great people. They're fantastic." Like, that would be a slight if we just said something warm. You don't stick the knife in a little bit. Right, and we expect the same. Sean does the same thing. Usually, any mention of me on social media is some sort of, kick to the crotch. You get a few folks who don't know our relationship or our sense of humor, and you go, "Geez, those guys beef." And so, I mentioned this because I think there's been a slight perception. It's a misperception that there's some sort of well, I can't speak for them. Maybe they do hate us, but anyways, I think there's I think there's a misperception that there's some sort of acrimony, whatever it is, between both camps. And at least on this side, couldn't be farther from the truth. Love those guys, want them to succeed, and cheer and root. So that's an honest thing. So although still think Ryan Eversley's a terrible human being, though. Oh, completely. That guy's hot trash, complete garbage. Yeah. But nonetheless, we support his growth as a human being.
Absolutely.
But so while we play and say negative things, but there is some warmth beneath it, you could also take things the other way, where you play a little bit and you play things up a little bit, maybe, and try and joke a little bit, do some somewhat amusing shots across the bow. And there's another reason for maybe doing that, because there is not that same level of respect and warmth and jovial back and forthness. I think that might be the honest take here, Graham, to offer. I don't know how far we'll... I mean, it's not like any of this matters. This certainly qualifies as first world problems.
Let me give you this. I've worked in the news media and around the news media for decades. Trained as a journalist in the early 80s, worked in PR and as a journalist in the background. And I think I've got a reasonably good take on the value of news. I don't like to see overuse of the word could. This could happen, this might happen. And I think the frenzy of trying to get information to the internet, just in case someone else gets it. Post
that quote of yours with a hashtag breaking exclusive scoop.
Okay. Look. Number one, before we go any further, we are talking here of people who are working very hard. My view is they're working a little bit too hard at times, and that's for not a very good reason. It is the reason, I'm afraid, is always got to be first, and all too often, I'm afraid, that can actually come at the expense of actually being ultimately correct. And look, I'm not going to put my hands up here and say I'm an angel. I'm not. I certainly I'm known by everybody that's ever worked with or for me, ever. And before that, with my entire family, and it's quite a big one, as being what might be reasonably called in UK parlance a wind-up merchant. And I most certainly am. But it's never brutally personal. And I have attempted to heal divides, and I'm not getting it back, I'm afraid. So, sorry, at this stage, bring it on. Delhi Sports Car's been around for a very long time. Our predecessor sites were around for a long time before that. And no, I'm not very appreciative of some of the things that I know are said about and around us by some of the people we're talking about here in derogatory terms. So, you know what? It is this simple. Bring it on. Simple as that. I've got nothing more to say about this one other than that. It's not directed at absolutely everybody involved here. It is directed at what has become an increasingly tiresome display of, what can you put it? How do you want to put this, MP? Of single-minded display of one-upmanship that is just frankly boring for absolutely everybody. I don't want to be, in a position where people are having to take sides in which media they trust. The facts should be the facts and the commentary should be the commentary. As far as I'm concerned, we do it the right way. We do it the right way. We do it with passion. We do it with feeling. We do it with depth. We are not always right, and when we're wrong, we say we're wrong. We don't try to hide that fact. We will apologise where that needs to be the case. And that is the standard I expect of absolutely everybody that works with and for me moving forward. And I wish that it was the same everywhere else. It's not just one outlet out there. We've either got the guys who say we're the biggest, we're the best, we've got the biggest budgets, look at us, millions and millions of readers. No, you haven't. Or we've got the everything must be first, we have to be the source for everything news-wise. It's just nonsense. It's nonsense. This is a sport. It's a sport which sees itself correctly, whether or not on the business side or on the fan side, as something of a family. It works really well like that. And when commercial interests get involved on that front, that's when it starts to go a bit squiffy. Stop taking sides, all of you.
Squiffy. I've never heard that before.
It's a bit of a UKism, but stop taking sides. It's nonsense. It's the only thing that is destructive. And if you don't realise that, then here's the truth: it's destructive. If you do realise that, damn you for doing things like that. Damn you for taking those sides and attempting to actually queer the debate. That is not what we're here for.
Look at that. We got 2 soapboxes in one episode from the same guy, Graham Goodwin. Look at you. Well, all right. Well, I'll throw a couple things out there. Of the things that I hate in life, and I rarely use the word hate, and I do not use it lightly or without an actual agreement with myself that I'm going to use the word hate, I hate people who are constantly negative, constantly complaining, constantly telling folks that despite leading a fairly charmed life, that they are constantly put upon, people are out to get them, bad things happen to them, would truly complain about ice cream and kittens and everything possible. I hate people who do nothing, who contribute nothing to positivity, warmth, growth, things where you say life is better on a daily basis because of your attitude, your approach to life, your just general contributions. So that's not saying that I hate everyone who's a glass half empty type, not at all. There's a difference between being a pessimist and someone who just constantly whines and moans and complains about everything in the media center, on social media, in a group, you name it. I not only do I have no time for those people, I find no value for their existence. And so when I come across someone like that, who as a grown man or a grown woman just drains the life out of any and everything that they touch, that's where I get a little protective, and it's protective of my own sanity. So to have someone like that in my constant orbit, there's one of them in IndyCar as well, and
Montoya? Is it Montoya?
No, I'm telling you, that guy is the worst. And everybody hates this guy, and everyone knows who he is in IndyCar, and it's just like, please, just kill me, just take me. All right, just get rid of me. Okay? If you're not planning on going anywhere, do me a favor and get me out of here. All these things aside, I'm overstating things a little bit, but I just struggle with someone where you go, wow, we're standing in a place of privilege. You get to travel and go to motor racing events, whether it's throughout the world, here domestically. You get to speak with all of these people that the average fan would dream of. Oh my goodness, you spent a half hour with this legend or hero or modern day champion. You got to be in and around this car and inside and out. Just access that people would pay to have, and to be there up front in this privileged position and just piss and moan the entire time and make others around you absolutely miserable as well. That's where I start to struggle. So how's that?
That's about it, isn't it? I think the answer here is we're delighted with what we can bring to you. I'm thoroughly enjoying bringing this podcast to you now. You know what? It's a broad church. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to change the way we do things because someone else wants to be whatever number one might feel like being. We've got a pretty good audience, and believe you me, there's some surprises coming moving forward. I know you and I are talking about direction for this product moving forward in some exciting ways too. The reality is here. I can see by the questions we get from the people we're talking to, we got the audience I want. Most of what I would regard as being my day-to-day friendships are with people I see in press rooms around the world. And bizarrely, one of them is next up, and it's a first-time caller.
What?
It is, and you've probably never heard of him, but it's a question for you, and it's from a Stephen Kilby. It says here, question for MP.
You need to do a better job, first of all, of weeding out the questions, because this is I'm
afraid so.
Part Goodwin.
Oh, sorry. Should explain. Stephen, and happy birthday, by the way, this week, Stephen. 24 years young. Stephen's been with and around Daily Sports Car since he was about 15 years old and producing a self-written Le Mans preview and distributing that through the web. Came to us with a little bit of help from our then backers Nissan to a WEC race at Silverstone, where he made a right Horlicks of it for the first half a day, but after that has recovered well, fairly well. Now my deputy editor at Daily Sports Car, and his first question comes from MP, and he says, we've seen plenty of drivers in the Indy Feeder Series ranks heading to IMSA, WEC and ELMS in recent years. Is there anyone in the current crop of Lights, Pro Mazda or F2000 drivers you think we should keep an eye on because they could end up in sports cars soon?
I love this question, young Steven. Yeah, so we do have a couple who I think we're going to find ending up there, here, wherever it might be. I know that Dalton Kellett, a young Canadian driver, told me later in the season that he has aspirations of doing the Indy 500 and hoping to do a shorter IndyCar program, all based on budget. Definitely wanted to break off into IMSA and prototypes, hopefully, as well. And I think for Dalton, that might be the latter, might be the smarter thing for him. I mean, he's been on the road to Indy for a while, been on the open wheel path for a while. Has, I think, a pole position, and I think he has a pole position to his name in Indy Lights. If he has a dream of doing the Indy 500, I hope he can achieve that dream, but there's nothing that I've seen in Indy Lights to lead me to believe he is going to get to IndyCar and then make a name for himself there. So I would rather see him, even though last week I offered with the contrarian opinion that there should be an age limit for young drivers coming into sports car racing. I think he's 24-ish, 25, smart kid, engineering physics major, big STEM person as well. I think if Dalton were to divert his budget and interests to IMSA and a prototype, he could have a long and fulfilling career. So I think he's one that would definitely look for there. The one who I fear might not have the money to go up to IndyCar for anything more than a little bit, but has real talent, someone who I think prototype teams, even GT teams, would really be impressed with, is somewhat young Aaron Telitz. And this is a kid, race winner, also winner of the Pro Mazda Championship coming up, using that full scholarship in 2017 in Indy Lights. This is a kid, Wisconsinite as well, that I think he has genuine talent. I don't know if we're talking IndyCar champion talent, but what he lacks most of all is serious multi-million dollar budget. So I would say, Stephen, of all the youngsters in Indy Lights / Road to Indyland, Aaron Telitz is the one that I would say could find himself gainfully employed in IMSA, in prototype, hopefully before too long, because the kid's really quick, really sharp, plus has a really fun personality too. So that's my answer.
Right, I'm going to clear up 3 or 4 really quick ones. We stand close to answering every question this week, which is astounding. David Shutt asks, is the release date for the new McLaren 720S GT3? If they decide to enter the GTD Sprint Cup, would they still need to pay the manufacturer's fee? Not sure about the latter one. The answer is that car should be available for customer sales next year. It is in testing. I'm due a catch-up with the team around testing at some point in the next few weeks, and we'll let you know on a future episode about that one. Might even see MP whether or not they'll let us put a recorder in the back of the car and testing. That'd be fun. That would be fun, wouldn't it? I don't know about the manufacturer's fee for the GTD Sprint Cup. You any idea?
I don't. I'm just going to raise my hand and say I don't.
No, let's move through that. Luke Birkin asks, any rumours on the potential special entries for the all-comers race at the Walter Hayes Trophy like last year? There will be some, I'm sure. I know there's been 1 or 2 LMP teams talking about whether or not they'll do it with an LMP3 car, or potentially something a little bit more potent, but no firm news as yet. Would be nice to think whether or not actually something blue with a white stripe and an AR in the back might decide to come out and have a bit of a play there. A race it could actually race in. Ben Island asks about the Renault RS01. Could it return as a regular in GT3 or GTE spec? The answer is no, because it's not a homologated car in either of those. There was a Renault RS01 in Violaine at the weekend with Francois Perraudot, Manu Collard and Mathieu Vazevière, finished 3rd in SPX and inside the top 20. Renault Sport now market that car as an endurance race. There are various race series where the car can actually race. It's got the Nismo GT3 engine in the back of it. I think it's a spectacular looking thing, but there is no road car, so no homologation therefore, but you can race, for instance, in a couple of classes in Creventic racing with the cars. I hope they're with us for a little wee while. David Faulkner asked for a bit of a shout out to the Australian LMP3 series, who are announcing some progress with a Michelin tyre contract for the year and beginning to pick up entries. Good luck to you guys. It would be very good to see that getting into rude health across in Australia and spreading the LMP3 word. That's just 4 very quick fire ones. Go for it.
I'll grab a few here from Facebook, and then I think we will bid farewell to this episode, if that's okay.
That's perfect.
All right. Let's see. We'll go here. Robert Paoli Jr. says, why doesn't the FIA run GT3 cars in place of GTE Pro at Le Mans and ELMS races? Well, Robert, I would say it's because those aren't their cars. Those are SRO-based cars. It's parallel-wise, it would be like asking, why doesn't Coca-Cola put Pepsi in its bottles? It's a completely different product and a competing brand. So that's why you don't have SROs, GT3 cars, running in FIA-based WEC / ELMS / Le Mans 24-hour events or standard 6-hour events, because it's not their cars. It's somebody else's formula altogether. Mark Brown says, when is Road America going to get a much longer IMSA race? No clue, Mark. I do know, as we might have mentioned here before, when we did one of our live Marshall Pruett podcast weekend sports car events at Road America, IMSA President Scott Atherton was one of our guests. This was posed to him and the entire crowd of, I don't remember whether it was 50, 75, however many people. I threw out, hey, would everyone like a 6-hour race or something longer? And we could not hear any of the cars on track because the applause was so loud. So I would say that IMSA certainly knows, Mark, that our folks in the Kettle Moraine Valley want more and longer IMSA stuff to play with. Let's go to our friend who we've deduced is not a Dutch chocolatier, is just a good old American with fine Canadian roots. Shay Adam. Back to a fun question. What is the best dessert you've ever eaten at a racetrack? Is it something anyone can get? She says, the Smoking Dog 1 year at Le Mans made a chocolate mousse cake, and I swear I ate a quarter of it. As the skinny guy in this podcast, I'll leave that one for you to ask, or to answer.
It was, oddly enough, it was another creation from the wonderful Smoking Dog, and it was, they did a pear crumble, which was utterly sublime. And let's not have any of this rubbish about sauce anglaise. Custard, fantastic, absolutely. That disappeared, and it was a catering level of supply of it, disappeared in seconds flat. That right there was a pudding.
So I don't have a great answer to this. I'll also give you a fun little side thing. In IndyCar, there's a woman who I think I've met maybe once. I've never received her gifts, which is good because I don't need them. My body type would tell you that. But she just goes by the Cookie Lady. And I believe she's also on Twitter. It might even be something as simple at Cookie Lady or the Cookie Lady. So you might look it up. She bakes cookies, puts them in little plastic containers, and tapes them so they wouldn't just open in transit or wherever else. Writes the name of who she intends to receive them, and then gives them out. So it could be, it's more often than not drivers. Could be a team owner. My colleague Robin Miller has received a fine Tupperware thing full of all kinds of cookies from the Cookie Lady. And just think about that, Graham. A fan, someone who loves a sport. Now, granted, we're also glad that she's not putting, strychnine or anything else in there, but someone who just loves motor racing, loves the people and personalities, and it spends time at home to bake cookies, brings them to the track, and just gives them to that person, to each person individually. Nothing expected in return, just really kind, warm gestures. Like that's just
spreading the joy.
The best thing. Yes, 1 pound at a time. Shay, I'll just say that while it might not, maybe it is the best. Not best because of its exquisite, but the years at Sebring where it has been scorching outside. I think 2015 comes to mind, where it was a trillion degrees. Just downstairs from the media center, hang a left, and one or two little things, little vendors down. There's a little tow-along trailer where they sell coffee, and they also sell little Frappuccino-type ice cream plus espresso plus whatever type drinks. And I'll tell you that I think it was 2015, where it was brutally hot, that I probably visited that fine little trailer 3 times, maybe 4 during the race. So someone might have thought that I just had a really, really major sweet tooth, but it was because it was extremely cold, extremely sweet, and I think I was really tired, so the espresso inside worked. So, again, might not have been an award-winning thing, but boy, wanting to cool down and have a little treat and stay awake, that has become my go-to place. Let's see.
I'm going to have to apologise because I've just realised that I missed an entire, because both you and I actually posted asking for questions, didn't we? So we've got 2 entire lists here
and I'm about
on Facebook.
And I'm about to grab a couple from the, I think it might have been the most recent one, or this, I'm not sure which one, but Jonathan Wesley says, do either of you know, from speaking to drivers, how effective is the practice of headlight flashing the car in front in terms of lappery and racing for positions? And Jonathan says, with such high driving standards at the elite levels in WEC, IMSA, ELMS, etc., it always looks a bit cheap and pointless when the top drivers do it. Could it ever go beyond being merely distracting to dangerous? I don't know if dangerous, I would say, Jonathan. I would say this, and it's funny, to me at least. You ask this question to drivers, sometimes in a press conference, but often just directly like, hey, does people flashing their headlights at you mean anything? And you'll hear from the pros will tell you more often than not, no, it just pisses me off. And if they're in my, say, if I'm in that same class as them, if anything, it makes me want to fight them even harder. Because I hate you. Like, you want to flash your lights at me, dick, out of my way, peasant. No, guess what? I'm going to give you the business every chance I can and fight even harder. I would say the only times that I've seen it work very effectively is when we have an amateur driver or, a gentleman, gentlewoman who is climbing into that car knowing that they really should be looking in their mirrors and use that to effectively say, oh, let me get out of the way. Then you got the flip side, right, Graham? Then you have some gentleman, gentlewoman, AM drivers who think of themselves as pros or mislabeled or whatever and want to prove a point. And so, yeah, I would say more often than not, Jonathan, I have not seen the flashing one's headlights truly work to reach the desired effect. If anything, I think it just gets annoying, and if all you're doing is actually pissing off the person in front of you, you might have actually created more of a problem. So maybe, like BOP references, Graham, maybe, now wouldn't this be fun? The actual headlight flashers, not turning on the headlights, but headlight flashing, maybe series could look at saying you get 3 per event or so. Use it wisely. Use it very wisely. Or just leave the button there, but don't connect it to anything. One of the two. So that would be my little suggestion here. What do you want to take next?
We'll take, so a quick deco, that's rather surprised me. We'll take this one from Kiwi Chris 1709, GT question. We've got Macau coming up soon. I think we all agree having the GT World Cup there is a terrible idea. If you were the boss, where will you hold it and why? I will tell you this. I wrote something not particularly complimentary about the fact there's only 15 cars on the list for the Macau GT World Cup this year. That's the lowest we've had in its time as an FI event. It's about half what it had back in the days of GT Asia. It's now, of course, a full pro event. I absolutely agree. I think it's in the wrong place. I think the last couple of races, all the races, have actually shown that. The cars are getting bigger, the cars are getting quicker, and the track isn't getting any less accommodating for that. If you're going to do it properly. Let's do it at Bathurst. Let's do that. Because if you want to throw the cars around and you want to have that opportunity for there to be dramatic effects, let's do it on a circuit that could accommodate the real speed of these cars. That's where I would have the FIA GT World Cup.
There you go. Are we done, Mr. Goodwin? Is there anything else we should really get to?
I think with my realisation in the last moments of the show that I'd missed an entire list, I think for the moment that would be a good one. What I will say here is, because we have missed a number of our fluffier questions, what I will do next week is I will post a list of the questions that we've missed here that we will take as priority questions next week. So leave that with me. I will make sure that goes onto Reddit and goes onto our Facebook page. Can't do that on Twitter, but it will point you towards that list. So apologies for those guys we've not come to. There are some great questions there. including kind of questions the likes of Big Racer Boy about oddball cars and the worst sounding cars in sports car racing. Questions I'd like to have a bit of time to answer. With apologies, though, we've run out a bit of time tonight because there's only so much recording medium in the world.
And it sounds like the aliens have returned to your headset again, so this is
excellent.
Yes, the perfect jumping off point. Well, a little bit longer of an episode than expected, but again, we do our best to intentionally keep them a little bit more compact now, so we might have failed on that front. We had a couple of good rants. That wasn't expected going in. We used 2 out of 3 BOPs, so that was good. We actually succeeded on one front, so yeah, all right. I think we should do it again next week. We've at least barely passed. We should come back next week, try it again. Hopefully the aliens will leave you alone by then. You need to eat your dinner, or at least maybe you just pushed it in front of the cat. Okay.
While you were ranting, I was eating moussaka. Fantastic.
Good.
The cat is not happy.
We're not editing out your robot sounds there either. We also opened the show by completely dropping the ball, so that was good. I mean, maybe we shouldn't come back now that I think. But regardless, for those of you who have stayed with us to the very end here, thank you. Thank you to our friends on Reddit, Twitter, and Facebook who've sent in questions. Graham, thank you for curating the ones that we did not get to this week. That'll be first next week. And with all that said, thank you to our friends, our dear supporters at Cooper Tires, for making this lovely little week in sports cars possible. I am Marshall Pruett. That is the delightful, alien-infused Graham Goodwin. We will speak to you next week.